All right, we're live today. It is April 9th, deep into quarantine, and we're here at Purple Politics
2020.
2020. So what numbers, we have some numbers up here on the board. What's this all mean, Kamal?
Yeah, so I mean, you guys have all been seeing in the news that the death rates, usually the narrative is that it affects older people. And that is true. It mostly affects people that are over the age of 70. But that is not the case as you go across the country. And we're going to discuss why that's not the case. Because we don't want young people to have the false sense of perception that they're somehow immune to this, because a lot of underlying conditions affect. And it's interesting because you're seeing people like Dr. Fauci explain that African Americans are more likely to get these if they get the COVID-19, they're more likely to um, uh, end up in ICU or pass away from it relative to their counterparts. And yes, there's some socioeconomic issues that we can discuss, but it is not as much of a just as an African American thing as it is a cultural thing, and also what region of the country. So the southern region of the United States has the highest obesity and disease rates, especially heart disease, obesity, and everything else that comes with those complications. And we're seeing that for example, if you see the stats right behind me, in Georgia, under 70, those who are under 70 are 49% of the deaths. So this is a large number of people under 70 in comparison to Colorado, which is 20% of the deaths that are under the age of 70. And then Spain, in fact, those under 70 are only 12% of the deaths. Now, if we focus that number even a little bit more and look at those between the ages of 40 to 59 in Georgia, they make up about 20% of the COVID-19 deaths, whereas in Colorado, it's only 10%, and even in Washington, it's only 6%. So
these are the numbers for everybody, or these are just African Americans?
No, these are numbers for everybody.
Okay.
So to highlight, obviously, there is a large population of African Americans that live in the South. But what I'm trying to highlight even further is that this has less to do with African Americans and more to do with the region of the country that individual is living. So if we look at the African American death rates in California versus Georgia, I think you're going to see a discrepancy between the two. And so I think as the news and everybody else is playing into now, that being said, obviously socioeconomics comes into play, and that could affect also not only how fast you decide to go to the hospital, which hospitals are around you, and so on.
Because on the surface, these numbers do feel socioeconomic, right? And yes. I think, and not to say that they're not fully, but I do think that the news currently is kind of using this particular percentage of what's happening in the African American communities to just specifically go, this is what happens when you don't have healthcare.
Right.
And that's not to say that it's not all fully true, but I think there's more in the numbers than maybe we want to really think about on the surface.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the main points that needs to be hit home is that we need to be honest about the fact that America has an obesity problem. We have a heart disease problem. There is a lot of problems that come with a Western diet, especially, not saying once in a while you can't have ice cream, once in a while you can't have donuts. Some of us have, including myself, like eat a little bit more during this quarantine thing. But I think a lack of balance, a lack of exercise, we're seeing all of those culminate, because of the coronavirus. And so those with underlying issues, as we've heard before, and that's not news, but to also point out that those that are young are not immune to this, especially if they have underlying issues, and the stats right behind me point to that. And again, this has more to do with what region of the country you're in, and what are the lifestyles of that region. I think if you look at a lot of Southern cooking, especially with African Americans, there's higher, use of sodium. There's higher use of fats, and so you're going to have hypertension. You're going to have heart disease. You're going to have, some people who are insulin resistant. So these things can't be. We can't just shove these things under the table and go, well, if you're African American, you're more likely to be susceptible. No, it's, again, it has to do with socioeconomics, and it has to do with the culture of that region, and if you have underlying problems.
Well, and like when I initially saw this stat too, I kind of went to the culture of like how closely people live together. And I
Right.
guess I don't really know much about the Southern statistic of rural versus metro in these, because I kind of thought about it on the surface level of saying, okay, I understand that maybe African Americans might be more susceptible in some way to this, but then I was also like, well, I do find that a lot of these populations are actually living in really dense metropolitan environments as well. Like, does this correlate more equally to those density issues, or is it actually like a biological thing, or is or like what you're saying, like the just lifestyle of culture of eating, which I mean, when you see in the South, I think it doesn't matter what race you are. Like, the culture of eating is just more poor in the South. It's just high fats,
Right.
a little bit less lifestyle of working out, and they take so much pride in that, of being like, yo, we like Southern cooking, white or black, it doesn't matter who you are.
100%. And I think that's where you're looking at, I think, region, culture, socioeconomics, all that, goes into play. It's not the fact that you have more melanin in your skin, and so for some reason there's something that African Americans possess that makes them more susceptible, as if being African American is similar to saying age. Age is an actual factor, whereas in an African American living in Washington or Spain is not going to have the same level of being susceptible to the coronavirus, if their region and culture is more likely to have a more balanced meal, or a more more vegetables in their diet,
Right.
and less likely to have underlying conditions.
And there's just, I mean, I look at like that Colorado stat, I'm just like, there's just not as many, it's just not as dense in Colorado as it is in Georgia.
Well, so
right?
I put Georgia has 10 million up there right next to the name.
Okay.
And then in Colorado, it's 6 million. I don't know how many
as a state.
As a state.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
And so
I'm actually surprised that it's that close. I would have thought Georgia has literally 3 times as many people as Colorado.
So just I think it was good. We have that, because you kind of, especially when you're looking at statistics, a lot of times you want to control for as many variables as possible. And in this situation, so let's say Washington population, as I'm looking up right now, is 8 million. So, and 8 million, with 8 million, it's right between Colorado and Georgia, and it only has 6% of the deaths are between the ages of 40 to 59 years old. And so there is a clear difference with somebody who lives in Georgia versus somebody who lives in Colorado and Washington. And the main thing that I think the news is doing is sort of brushing it over and essentially listing like, well, there's a lot of African Americans who live there. And yes, but being African American is not, it's not biological in the sense of the same thing as age. It's just that the African Americans that live in the South are more likely to, like anybody who lives in the South, including the African Americans, are more likely to have them being obese or somebody in their family being obese. It's just the culture, the lifestyle, the socioeconomics of the southern states make them more susceptible to the coronavirus, and that's just the honest truth.
And it's tough, I think, when like the news doesn't want to tell us that maybe Italy's problem is the fact that they smoke a lot.
Yeah, and
right.
That's a factor we were discussing that last week. Yeah,
right.
And
So it's just like not only like we were thinking about today. Okay, let's just take everybody else's statistics as they are. Maybe China isn't lying to us. Maybe Italy hasn't said anything wrong, which no one's perceived them to say any statistics wrong.
Yeah, I trust Italy's and Spain's
and maybe
numbers,
the U.S. isn't covering anything up.
Right.
Like it might have a lot to do with the lifestyle of, how many people do you have in your household? From my understanding, Chinese people don't have as many people in their households.
Because are you saying because of the one child rule?
Because of the one child rule,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Maybe they live kind of more interculturally, like Italy.
Yeah.
I guess I maybe would assume that.
Yeah.
These are all just assumptions. It's literally nothing that I actually know.
But these are variables and questions that we have to ask, as this thing moves forward to see, what are some of those underlying things. So as a country, as we move forward from this, I think it's not just addressing our healthcare system is not just about addressing coronavirus and then it's done, but it's the fact of addressing not only healthcare, but preventative care, so that, flus and diseases like this, we're not susceptible to, especially if we can avoid them through better access to nutrition and education.
Because like right now, a big talking point is the fact that like the U.S. is surpassed everybody as far as the breakout in the virus.
Yeah.
New York is actually second to the U.S. when it comes to any countries. New York State, as far as how many people have contracted the virus there.
Yeah.
And it's easy to point to, well, one, maybe we mishandled it. We might have, or our healthcare system is failing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really get down to like a lot of the mortality rates, it actually is showing that our healthcare system is crushing it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have in a positive way. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have more people being able to have access to our healthcare system. But I think our healthcare system in the United States is actually proving to be great. Not for everybody, but when you're in our hospital is making it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at, do we have a high education system? Do we have great doctors? Do we have great nurses? Once you get into the hospital, I think the politics of it is what happens once the outside of the hospital, right? When it comes to insurance payments,
Right.
Those are some of the things. But if I'm sick, I want to be in an American hospital for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
You just don't want to get hit with an American bill.
Yeah.
That is fine with being a different part of the conversation.
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes that's where a little bit of this like healthcare system in the United States being bad is when you're in the hospital, we actually have a superior healthcare system.
Right.
But when you get hit with a bill, that's where we have a lot of flaws that we need to figure out. One, how can everybody get accepted when they jump into that hospital? And then two, when you walk out, how, if they fixed your leg, how do you also not have it get cut off with that bill?
Yeah. I mean, and it shows you that, I guess maybe the lack of putting health as a forefront until there is a crisis will show out in these type of situations. And so I think that, there's going to be the hotspots for sure will happen throughout this country. It's going to move around, as President Trump has said, and others have said. And when it does go into the South, the one of the tragedies, I think, is going to be the young, those under 70, or even those in between the ages of 40 to 59, assuming that, they're not as susceptible. And it's like, but in that region, that's not the case. And so, just in
now
them seeing that is can be devastating.
Now, another thought too is, what is the life expectancy in different regions? So,
Right.
so the percentage of under 70 in Georgia, which looks like, whoa, that's a lot. How many people in Georgia, based on that lifestyle, all Southern people in general, are living past 70
Right.
on a percentage basis? Like, because like the red and blue zones and stuff
Right.
like that, like
Right.
where Minnesota does pretty darn well, California crushes it as far as those health and lifestyle kind of things.
Right.
You just live longer. So obviously those percentages are going to be more spread out.
Right.
Where if you get in some of these more rural areas, once you're like 60 years old, people are already like acting like it's over.
Right. And you bring up an excellent point, which is right now we have a loud disease, right, which is the coronavirus. But when there's a silent war going on, which is diabetes, which is obesity, and the numbers would probably actually match, right? Because there's a correlation between that. And I think that us being honest with ourselves as a nation to say, yes, okay, during coronavirus, these problems are highlighted, but these problems have always been here. It's the reason why those under 70 at Spain is only 12% of them will pass away. And in Georgia, it's going to be almost 50%.
That's crazy.
I mean, that discrepancy is way too much. So it just highlights when we don't have something like the coronavirus, how much we kind of just put it to the side and how not at the forefront as it needs to be. It's kind of like building your house next to the water and not having flood insurance. It's like, well, your house is going to go down not because you caused the flood, but you were just too close to the beach and weren't really thinking about safeguarding it from something else coming in.
Yeah, like you get flooded and you live 2 feet from the water and you're blaming it on God. It's like, well, come on.
Exactly. And so I think just highlighting the theme where the news or a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in this 24-hour coverage is that like, well, African Americans this, and as an African American, you don't have a higher chance of getting COVID-19 because you have more melanin in your skin. It's because of all these underlying factors such as socioeconomics, such as cultural eating habits that we need to just be honest about and address them when we don't have coronavirus either. And if we don't, the death rates for those under 70 will be at 50%, which is an atrocious amount.
Who's that rapper that's getting called out because he was on that radio show and he was talking about how like melanin actually in your skin allows you to, it makes it for you're protected from COVID. I can't remember. It wasn't.
I'm glad I don't know his name.
He was a rapper that was big back in the day.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. I can see his face. I can't remember his name.
You're right.
Shoot. But that's what we do like to like jump to all these like quick conclusions where it's like first African Americans can't be harmed by this, and now they like overwhelmingly are. It's like sometimes we just got to give ourselves a time to like actually let the statistics play out and figure out like maybe there's more going on than we think.
And that's the importance of even taking a basic statistics class and then really looking at things from like, is this a causation or is this a correlation? Is this caused by that, or is it just happen to be a factor that does correlate? And sometimes correlation tells a story as well that we need to pay attention to. And that's kind of all I have on this topic for today.
I'm thinking one more thing we need to discuss is like, how long are we going to be in quarantine? I mean, we might need to add that up on the board real quick. Like how long?
We should do a survey,
I would love, I want people to start taking bets on this comment section, and we need to figure out how long are we really going to be in this thing. The reason everyone's thinking about this all the time, but in Los Angeles, there's a huge homeless problem. It's just one of those things. The environment is it's brutal. Like between the systems that are in place, the weather allows people to obviously migrate here to be able to actually, it's more favorable to be able to live on the street here. But once you get down here, the economics of the situation really make it for you're stuck here for life. And the LA County right now has just said that they're going to have 15,000 beds that they're going to be leasing out from hotels in this area. And they leased out the hotels starting this Monday for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of freaked me out. Hopefully that has to do with them addressing the homeless problem on a grander scale, even for the future. But if that has anything to do with how long they expect us to be in quarantine, that's wild.
Well, there's here's also, to add on to that, what is the acceptable rate of death that we as a society, because they asked President Donald Trump, hey, what is the acceptable rate? He said 0.
Which you have to say as a president.
100%. As anybody in politics, even a doctor, you're supposed to say that. But we have to also live in the real world. There is no such thing as 0. When everybody gets in a car and drives down the street, we know that the death rate is not going to be 0. Yet we've accepted it because it allows us to live in a society and economics continues. What is that number for COVID? And as I was reading today, they're saying that COVID might be a seasonal thing from now on.
Sure.
So, okay. So comes back in the fall, but might come back again next spring. And so
hopefully we have a vaccine by then, but yeah.
Hopefully we have a vaccine by then. Hopefully it doesn't mutate.
But what if we don't? That's kind of that's the real conversation. What if we don't have a vaccine by next spring?
Yeah. And so what is that acceptable rate of death? Or do we accept a new norm like this? And so that's why I think about, I'm like, we wouldn't do this for any other industry. We wouldn't do this again for automobiles. It's not like, imagine, like, think about this. Texting and driving causes deaths. I mean, it's at a level where our hospitals are not over flooded. So I understand that. But it's not like we turn off our cell phones. It's not like AT&T says, oh, we see you're going 60 miles per hour. You cannot text. We have the technology to do that.
Right.
But we don't do that. We don't automatically turn off people's texts.
Because like the freedom of stuff, the freedom of being a U.S. citizen, which is, we really don't want that type of top-down enforcement.
I mean, anywhere in the world, right? Like you can drive 60 miles per hour and your texting doesn't get turned off. But you could make an argument for turning off texting, because when people text and drive, the death rate is probably even higher than drinking and driving. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think it is higher.
Yeah, because if you imagine, texting is like you close your eyes and you're driving. That is, at least I think with people who are drinking and driving, they're at least, even if they're not all there, their eyes could be on the road. Whereas if you're texting, your eyes are actually not on the road. You've closed your eyes. That's exactly what it's like.
I mean, yeah, there was a time that I think everybody got pretty good at it, but we all stopped.
I mean, here's the thing. If phones were still with T9, where you could hold it like this, and
T9 would save lives right now.
T9, I could text T9 and look at the road. Easy.
I remember watching people in class who were really good T9ers. I never hit that skill.
I was so good at T9.
Yeah, you could send out a whole text underneath the desk.
I was typing 60 words per minute.
Yeah, that was crazy with T9.
So, so there needs to be, we do have scientists, and I think needs to be now. My hope is that President Trump and Pence chill out, and in their place, we have economists that come in and show us simulations. And these economists should also make a pledge to say, look, our hospitals and our society could probably handle this percentage of death rate per month, per year, whatever it is. Because not having that number, I think, leaves everybody in the dark, because we have an acceptable death rate number for everything else that we do. And yet we don't have that, or may not have that, for something like a virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
even if it's like 0.001, I don't care what.
So what are you going to guess though? What are you going to say? What day are we free?
what
I would say, like, what day are we free in California?
May 4th. We know this is what I want. This would be my dream, right? Everybody is free. The first day that we're free is maybe May 4th. May 5th is what?
Well, it's Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo.
So I don't think we should go free before Cinco de Mayo. It's too many people are going to be getting wild.
I mean, and that's the other problem of caging people for this long too.
I like the idea of being free on Cinco de Mayo, but I also know that all states won't be free by then.
Yeah.
And so what I do assume is going to happen is like there's going to be Midwestern cities that get free, and like Florida is obviously going to be like the free real quick. We're just going to be watching all these videos of people out, and then those numbers are going to spike through the roof.
How long till President Trump brings up a Dr. Fauci equivalent of an economist to say, okay, here we have the healthcare report. Here's the economist report.
Well, yeah, like I do
when-
think that it's time, unfortunately,
Right.
you should have like 4 scientists to 1 economist in this conversation.
I think we can get down to 2 and 2. We
2
get
to
it.
2.
Yeah. I mean, because why do we need 3? 2. I trust 2 scientists as much as I do 4 scientists.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, outweighing the vote, you know, he's got to like kind of explain it to some of the guys.
The science is very clear. Of the more data that we have, a scientist can look at the data and say, based on our best assessment, this is what it is.
Sure.
But what I want to see is a right-leaning conservative economist,
It's coming.
and I want to see a more liberal left-leaning economist, and then they should get up there. And instead of having Trump and Pence up there, let's hear from these 2 economists and let the American people look at, you know, what is our outlook from an economy perspective as well? Because it's going to take down a lot of people.
Well, the hardcore lefty econ guy right now
Right.
is actually going to want to have this extend out long enough that we have to basically go a route where we have
UBI?
Yeah, a UBI, universal basic income. And because if, like, let's say I'm a person that believes in a total communist society,
Okay.
and I believe that America would be better for it and with it.
Yeah.
This is your moment. This is the one perfect storm that you could actually have good justification for saying we have to start UBI right now. And, you know, all of these different systems are finally broken down to a point where they're at that perfect space that you could pick up with a communist system.
See, that's not what, from my perspective, what a UBI economist or anybody who would advocate for UBI would say. The UBI would say, look, here's the current bottom right now. And this current bottom, where the economy is going and how much the top is hoarding, it is not allowing this bottom to participate in the economy and yet have a meaningful life. If we can make the bottom, instead of being here, to the bottom, now the new bottom being here, in a already existing economy, then it makes sense. UBI doesn't work in an economy that's halted.
But that would be a good way to jumpstart it.
Okay, I see.
So
yeah,
you could, like, if you
so
would
how you
want to
saying
hold it,
implement it? Yeah,
and you would want to strangle the capitalistic system, I think, a little bit longer. Not that I think this thing is strangled pretty bad right now.
I mean, once we reach 32% unemployment rate, can we look up what was the unemployment rate in the Great Depression? I mean, you had guys in like suits waiting in the bread line. So, this is the only time I wish I had Alexa. Otherwise, I don't like her listening in.
Let's see.
Unemployment rate, Great Depression. 24.9%.
Woof.
We have a few credible economists that are saying, and we had a negative 26% GDP decline. If we hit 32%, that would be, again, unprecedented territory. And we're easily on our way there.
What are we currently at? We have 6.6 million people that are unemployed.
Additionally,
okay, yeah, within like the last like 2 weeks, right?
yeah. So unemployment employment rate. See, this is why I wish I had T9 right today. Okay. What? Well, 7 days ago it said it's at 13% from the New York Times. 7 days ago, 13%.
Okay, so we still have a ways to go for the Great Depression. I'm not like we're in a bad spot.
Yeah.
I just think it's hilarious when people think that this isn't going to hit harder than 2008. This is going to hit so much harder than 2008.
We're way past that. We're way past that.
That's still like a discussion topic where it's like, is this going to be worse than 2008? It's like
was what 6% or 7%, and we're like, what the hell?
Right.
You know, like 8% at most, like at 13.3% 7 days ago. I mean, it is crazy because this is going to change really quickly.
It is a different scenario though, where like I do think a lot of these companies are going to have to obviously hire immediately because we have so many bars and restaurants. If they stay afloat, the day that they open, they need 30 people back. Fire.
This is a topic for next time, but my argument for tomorrow is going to be the fact that, and we're seeing this today, who creates jobs? Customers. Customers create jobs. If Facebook built out somewhere in the jungle of Amazon, how much money is it going to make?
Yeah.
If you have customers, everybody wants toilet paper. Guess what? Somebody's going to figure out how to fill that need. To fill a need is so much easier than to create a customer. If you have customers, you can serve those customers.
Yeah.
And we know that. And so if we do not have money flowing through the middle class, our whole economy is going to crash. And so we have Canada that's sending out checks in 2 to 3 days. The United States can't send out electronic checks in 3 weeks. This is a problem.
Yeah, it is one of those things. Like we've been in a situation where someone told us they were sending us money. It took us to way longer than it was normally supposed to happen. And I just call bullshit, which is the same thing I'm calling bullshit on this. Like the technology is available. If they say, I get they have to kind of like release it or whatever, but you think we could just like make it happen.
Do you remember in January when we did the attack on the Iranian general?
Yeah.
How long ago does that feel?
That was at least a year ago.
Right? I mean, it doesn't even feel like the news is like, man, the world is coming. We might start World War III. And there was this little virus just ravaging China on its way here. And we were just chilling. No one really cared. Most people didn't know what was coming.
I'm just like, it seems like the last few years, it's just like every single 6 months, we try to think of one more thing that's going to end the world.
Right.
And this COVID thing is absolutely real and absolutely a disaster.
You know, the funny thing is, if President Obama was president right now, those who go to some of these like evangelical or Baptist churches would have said, this is the coming of the end or whatever, the second coming of Christ.
Will he be the Antichrist?
Or the Antichrist. And this virus was because God was mad at America for picking President Obama.
People think that right now about Trump, though.
No. But
people think Trump's the Antichrist.
Okay, but like the people that hate Trump, a lot of them are not like religious people. I'm talking about like
I get that.
Deeply.
Yeah.
Like that lady, if it was President Obama today, she would have been like, this is a sign, don't you see, that because we elected President Obama, God is punishing us all.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there that thinks Mother Earth is punishing them now.
Exactly. No.
Like
for sure.
Mother Earth is sent COVID to tell America to shut the fuck up.
Or the world. Yeah,
world.
Yeah. I would say in this situation, we are seeing that humans hate the coronavirus because we are very similar to the coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're pests for sure.
We love just spreading quickly.
And the weather is just not been nice lately. Like, especially in LA. It's been cloudy, it's raining today.
I know.
People are really struggling with it. There's a lot of LA people who think that COVID was sent from Mother Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is something something went wrong, right?
Well, yeah, but they think it's like this living, breathing organism that was like, fuck you.
Oh, it's like Mercury was in retrograde.
Like, I'm a God person, and I believe that like God is what science is like learning about. Okay. Which is all of these different mechanisms actually come for specific reasons. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, God created the coronavirus because God is everywhere and God is the start and end of everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I think he wants it to like spread and kill everybody because we did something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, well, it's part of the earth that has been created.
It's so interesting how our brains work, right? When the sense of like we could be facing the same thing, live together, and just have such different perceptions of things. Where, like, yes, somebody could believe it was Mother Earth, somebody could believe it's God. I believe that something like the coronavirus is telling us you actually don't matter as much as you think you do from an ego perspective. I think we as humans have this ego where we're like, you know, God created the earth and the birds for us. And I'm saying this as like somebody, you know, with, you know, from the Muslim faith background.
But as a species, we're greatest of all time. We're the GOAT.
We're the wait. So then, how is the coronavirus is making us all locked down in a house like little pussies? Like, what do you mean? Like,
because we morally care about the other people.
All right. Okay.
You know what I mean? So like we are conscious and we're like, okay, well, I don't want other people to be harmed by this, but we still know we're the GOAT.
Yeah. We're conscious, yes. And yet our brain can simultaneously have irrational fears to the point where we'll hoard money and we'll hoard food and we'll hoard resources, even if it's going to destroy parts of the planet that we really need. You know, somehow,
because like
we can do both.
That's where sometimes right wingers act a little bit more with instinct of a dog, which is like, you know, this shit's gonna happen. Like, let the stats lie as they're gonna lie. Right. As far as like all animals are looking at like a virus and they just keep on running after their prey. Yeah. And they're like, if you get eaten on my way, you get eaten on my way, I can't help you.
I mean, make no mistake, the left wingers have a lot of hypocrites. They'll tell you how Nike is creating sweatshops and yet support Nike because they support Kaepernick. There's a lot of hypocrites. Don't get me wrong. Right. You know what I mean? And at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, like we don't want Mother Earth. And it's like, bro, you got an iPhone, you got an Apple Watch, you got an Apple computer. Where do you think all these minerals are coming from? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's much easier said than done to actually be a personal carbon neutral person, you know, and that will be cool when we can measure on a Fitbit your carbon intake throughout the day.
Yeah, that's gonna be really difficult
for people.
That's gonna be a really interesting reality to have to wake up in.
Yeah,
because it's like turning on your Fitbit for the first time. I don't have Fitbit, but we have that. What is it? The MyFitnessPal, and that's pretty scary. The first few days that you turn it on, it's tough to keep up with.
You realize how much you're actually consuming. Wow. And we apologize for the, you know, I have no lineup, no haircut for a while, so I look semi-homeless, and LJ's covering it up with a hat, so it's pretty good. Any other points?
I don't think we really have much else to say today. It's kind of going to be a downtime for a lot of topics, but I do think that we're getting into a huge political standoff when it comes to how we deal with COVID going through this summer and then going into the fall. I think there's going to be some huge differing opinions, and it's going to be interesting to sit around and talk to you about it while it's happening, because I don't know.
You know how so I guess my last point to that, and to give an analogy, when the first week of the lockdown, you just saw all the shelves just being ravaged, right? Like people were going in, they were grabbing everything they could.
They looked like the cabinets that Obama left Trump, as he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were gone.
They were gone, right? And so
that's not my statement, and that's not what I believe, but that's
Trump had 3 years, played way too much golf, bro. So when you go in, you see the shelves are essentially empty, except for the part where things said vegan, right? And so you're like, oh, we'll see who the real vegans are.
Yes.
Right? What I want to see is who the real Republicans are. Because when things get tough and this thing is going through the South and people are like, I need the government to help me because I was not expecting this. Let's see how many of them maintain. Some of them might still be Republican. I don't know. But they're going to
still stay Republican.
Yeah. So it's just going to be interesting, right? Because in that situation, it's like, well, let's see how many people stay Republican, how many people stay Democrat.
Well, that's kind of the weird thing with this. Like, I do think the federal system is supposed to be. I think the federal system should be looking further in the future, and it is liable for how we deal with pandemics. Like, where a lot of people are like, oh, well, why don't the governors make sure that they have enough stocked ventilators? I go, well, maybe the hospitals need to create a flex system to be able to have a better understanding of like, how can we go up and down with that? But they, as we've learned, they've actually been regulated out of being able to do that effectively. They can't really have that growth and stretch that we need during this type of time. But I think it is on our federal government to look out for these types of systems.
Yeah, I mean, being attacked by a virus or a terrorist, what's the difference? It's a national attack that affects all 50 states. And this is the time when, the federal government should lead.
Yeah, I don't think Trump's in the right when he's going like, well, hey, man, like the federal government's supposed to stay out of your shit. Like governors figure it out. I go, no, it's literally like bombs getting dropped on the soil and being like, well, California, you didn't care about me during the election, so I'm not going to care about you now. It's like, well, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah. So,
but I also didn't like the way that like when Trump actually tried to corridor off like New Jersey, New York, and something else, and they fought against him where they weren't going to like passage in and out. Like, yo, no, Trump, like. I don't want a president to be able to tell people that you can't go in and out of New York.
Right.
I like the fact that a governor can go, nobody else can come into this state.
Right.
But I can't let a governor say nobody can leave my state.
Right.
That gets a little dicey.
Yeah. Yeah, that gets really weird. And we'll see how these things play out. But I think the COVID-19 is, however you want to look at it, fortunately and unfortunately, is a wake-up call for the big one. When I say the big one, I mean exponentially higher death rates.
Like that 30% death rate.
Yeah, 30, 50% death rate.
Because that probably will happen at some point.
Absolutely.
Not well, because we already kind of had it happen with Ebola.
Right.
The interesting thing is it's the death rate, but it needs an extended period of time. Like in the movies like Contagion or whatever, where you get it and you die in a day, that virus doesn't actually spread.
Right.
Because you don't get to meet enough people to have this like catastrophe type of thing.
Right.
So it has to be like, oh, I touched that, like that food 2 weeks later. Now I die. It's 100%. There's actually this weird little kind of, curve that this thing jumps.
If you're looking at it purely from a science perspective, when you look at the way that coronavirus behaves, it's actually, I don't know what the right word for it, not surprising, but it's perplexing, because the fact that a person can get it and die within a week or two, another person has like it's essentially zero symptoms,
feels sluggish,
has zero symptoms relative to death, is really interesting, because usually it could be like, you have a fever, stay home so you don't spread it. But the fact that you can spread it and just take down people without knowing you have it, in some ways, it's like the HIV virus. Just quiet enough, long enough to take down enough people.
Do you see that German study that came out today? This German study came out of that. This, like, if you have an O blood type, like, this thing's not taking you down, and they had kind of a disproportionate amount of people in this particular spot in Germany that this virus really, it was like 0.03% or something like that of people that it was taken out.
What's your blood type?
I don't know. I think I'm O.
I ain't figured it out. What's my blood type?
Your 23 and me tell you that?
I should ask them. I should ask them.
I guess I don't know.
Germany. Okay. Yeah. I mean, all the places in the world where their prime minister or leader is a woman has very relatively lower coronavirus spread. So
empathy genes in there.
Yeah, they're probably smart. Oh, 3 weeks ago, some blood types may be slightly more susceptible to COVID-19. People with blood group A really at a high risk. Oh, okay, we'll see. We'll see where this is going to go.
We have 3 different blood types. This is a stupid question for some people. For me, I have no idea.
It looks like A, B, and O.
A, B. Okay.
A, B, and O. So it's A.
And a B. And then an A and a B and an O.
No, yeah.
There's 4 different blood types.
Yeah.
All right. So we learned something today. That's positive.
Oh, so blood type. Okay, so here's what the one of the studies says. Blood type A has 37%. Blood type B has 26%. Blood type AB is 10%, and blood type O is 25%. So blood type AB.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
So I was wrong with the O.
So here it says, yeah, it's saying it's AB.
You want the AB. Okay.
So that double.
And if you've stayed on here long enough with us, give us some topics for tomorrow. We'll sit here, we'll discuss them. We'll get into some detailed research tonight to make sure that we can come in with some level of value for you.
Yeah, we gave you some data in the background. Let us know what you think and if our analysis of the stats is correct or if you have a different viewpoint.
All right. I think that's good for today. Over and out. Godspeed.